It is 1883 in West Texas. Cattle fortunes are booming, and land changes hands as fast as the wind. But at the Pitchfork Ranch, two men draft a radical charter: never borrow a dime, never sell an acre. Everyone says it is madness, until the great die-up blizzard hits, wiping out entire empires overnight. Somehow, the Pitchfork survives. For 140 years, this 165,000-acre giant has never fallen, never changed hands, and never taken on debt, not once. Today, Cowboys still gather at the same table as those in 1883, riding out blizzards, market crashes, and the oil booms that could have rewritten ranching history. What did they risk, and what secrets kept this legend alive when nearly every peer vanished? December 1883 brought a new kind of Texas gamble, one played not with cattle or cards, but with pen and ink. In a borrowed St. Louis office, Eugene Williams and D.B. Gardner signed their names to the Pitchfork Land and Cattle Company charter. The text was plain, but the rules behind it were anything but ordinary. No bank would ever hold a claim on their land. No acre would ever leave the company's hands. The company would grow only by cash and caution, never by credit. Most ranches in the cattle boom stretched their luck with borrowed money and risky expansion. Williams and Gardner wrote a different code, one that would outlast drought, depression, and every market panic that swept the West. The original charter set the scale: 52,500 acres of raw Texas grass and 9,750 head of longhorns, all branded with the three-pronged pitchfork. Gardner, a Texas surveyor with an eye for water and shelter, chose ground just under the Caprock, valleys carved by the South Wichita River, with natural breaks to shield cattle from northern winds. Williams, a shoeman from St. Louis, brought business discipline and a promise. Every dollar earned would be turned back into land and cattle, never into debt. 6 men made up the first board: A.D. Brown as president, Williams as vice president, A.P. Bush Jr. as secretary, Gardner as general manager. When Bush resigned after the first year, Gardner took on the secretary's duties too, tightening control over every decision. The company's bylaws were strict but simple. Land could only be bought, never sold. Borrowing was forbidden. Profits were to be plowed back into the range. This wasn't just stubbornness. It was a shield against the boom and bust cycles that toppled so many neighbors. The headquarters rose near the middle of the spread, close to what would become U.S. Highway 82. From this center, the ranch could be watched in every direction. Camps were built at the range's edges, each one a day's ride apart. Gardner's system meant that no part of the herd, no water hole, no fence line was ever out of reach. The new company was lean, but its structure was built for the long haul. No easy money, no quick sales, no outside interference. While others in the 1880s raced to stake claims and leveraged every asset, the Pitchfork's founders chose patience. They kept their books tight and their ambitions rooted in the dirt. When the first hard winter hit, their cattle had grass left to eat and water to drink. The ranch had no debts to call in, no mortgages to foreclose. Williams and Gardner's code, written into that quiet St. Louis charter, set the Pitchfork apart from the very beginning. It was more than a business plan. It was a promise. This land and everything on it would endure. The winter of 1886 arrived with a cold front that swept across the Texas plains and did not let go. For weeks, snow fell in sheets, drifts piled high against the wire, and the wind cut through every hollow. Across the West, cattle herds weakened by a dry summer found no shelter, no feed, and no escape. The open range, once a promise of endless grass, became a graveyard overnight. In the northern panhandle, fences meant to keep herds in became death traps instead. Cattle drifted south, pressed against the wire in desperate knots, smothering and freezing as the blizzards raged on. Cowboys rode out and found carcasses stacked for miles, sometimes 250 per mile along the fence. Some ranches lost 3/4 of their herds in a single season. The Diamond C and Bar CC were nearly wiped out. Panic swept the cattle towns, bankers called in loans, and the smell of dead cattle hung over the land well into spring. Yet on the Pitchfork, the story played out differently. Gardeners' choice of ground, those valleys tucked under the caprock, with breaks for shelter and the South Wichita running through, gave the herd a fighting chance. When water holes froze, there was still running water in the river. Where the wind scoured the open prairie, the Pitchfork's draws and ridges broke the worst of the storm. The cattle here had not been pushed to the edge by overstocking or drought. There was grass left to paw through, and enough cover to survive the coldest nights. The books stayed closed to the banks. No creditors arrived to tally up the losses. While neighbors watched their spreads carved up by foreclosure, the Pitchfork's land remained whole. No mortgages, no forced sales, no outside hands dictating the future. The company's bylaws, stubborn as they seemed, had become a lifeline. No land sold meant every acre was still in play for recovery. No debt meant the ranch could weather the storm without surrendering its independence. When the thaw finally came, the tally was grim across Texas. Most of the cattle empires built on borrowed money and speculation were gone. The Pitchfork, battered but intact, stood as proof that patience and discipline could outlast even the harshest winter. In the years that followed, the ranch kept growing, adding land, rebuilding herds, and doubling down on the code set in that St. Louis charter. The Great Die-Up had rewritten the rules of ranching, but at the Pitchfork, those rules had been written down from the start. Survival here was no accident. It was the result of choices made before the first snow ever fell. Every morning before sunrise, the bunkhouse stirs to life. Boots thump the old floorboards, spurs clink in the hallway, and the smell of coffee drifts from the cookhouse, just as it did a century ago. The table at the heart of it all is more than just furniture. It's a living link to the past. The long pine boards are cut and joined in the same style as the original 1900 cookhouse table, where generations of cowboys have started and ended their days. Here, there's no head of the table, no special seat for the boss. Cowboys, day hands, and managers all share the same meal, passing biscuits and stories down the line. The etiquette is as old as the ranch itself. Hats come off at the door. No one eats until the blessing is said. The cook's word is law. Latecomers find their plates cold, and complaints about the grub are met with a glare that could sour fresh milk. The menu hasn't changed much. Sourdough biscuits, eggs fried in cast iron, slabs of salt pork, and black coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. The cookhouse once fed dozens during spring roundups and family reunions, its walls echoing with laughter and the scrape of chairs. Even after the original cookhouse was moved to the National Ranching Heritage Center in 2007, the tradition carried on at the headquarters. Same table, same rules, same sense of belonging. When the crew heads out, each man grabs his own gear, a bedroll, a slicker, and a set of working tack that's been broken in by years of dust and sweat. The range teepee, canvas stretched over willow poles, remains the cowboys' shelter during long days and nights spent far from headquarters. After supper, cowboys roll out their bedding on bare ground or inside the teepee, just as their predecessors did when the only light came from the stars and a lantern hung from the wagon wheel. The rhythm of the day is set by the needs of the herd, not by the clock. During spring and fall roundups, the chuck wagon rolls out across the grass, its iron wheels creaking under the load of Dutch ovens and flour sacks. The wagon boss calls the shots, and the cook's fire is the center of camp life. Cowboys eat sitting on the ground or on overturned buckets, swapping stories about broncs and blizzards, while the remuda grazes nearby. The scene could be lifted from any decade since 1883. Only the pickup trucks and two-way radios hint at the present. Despite the spread of modern technology, helicopters overhead, computers in the office, the core of cowboy life at the Pitchfork remains unchanged. 10 full-time hands cover 165,000 acres, but each one knows that the real measure of a cowboy isn't found in gadgets or gear. It's found at the table, in the saddle, and around the fire, where respect is earned by hard work and a quiet sense of duty. At the Pitchfork, tradition isn't a museum piece. It's a living, breathing code, passed down with every meal, every handshake, and every sunrise on the open range. The legend of the Pitchfork Gray horse began not with a single stallion, but with a relentless pursuit of quality. In 1941, manager Rudolph Swenson brought Seal Brown to the ranch, a compact, steel-muscled quarter horse whose bloodline would set a new standard for ranch remudas. Seal Brown's colts were quick, sure-footed, and smart, and his daughters became the backbone of the Pitchfork's broodmare band. After his death in 1946, the search for the next great sire led to Joe Bailey's King, a stallion whose foals carried both speed and cow sense. Each generation, the ranch kept only the best: mares that could go all day, and stallions that could turn a steer on rough ground. Over time, a signature look emerged: gray coats dappled silver, black manes and tails streaming in the wind, eyes sharp with intelligence. The Pitchfork Gray became as recognizable as the ranch's three-pronged brand. Buyers came from as far as Argentina and Australia, drawn by the reputation for horses that could work cattle at dawn and still have enough left to win in the arena by nightfall. The remuda, now 80 heads strong, is a living archive of decades of careful breeding. Each colt is started on the range, learning to read cattle, cross rivers, and handle the unpredictable moods of West Texas weather. There's no shortcut to this kind of horseflesh. No feedlot, no show barn, just miles of open country and the daily work of real cowboys. The Pitchfork's horse program isn't just about looks or lineage. These horses have carried cowboys through lightning storms and dust devils, over rocky draws and endless grass. They're bred to handle the roughest jobs: roping wild cattle, dragging calves to the fire, or running flat out across a pasture with a rope in hand. The ranch's broodmare band stands at 50 strong, each one selected for soundness, disposition, and a record of performance under saddle. 4 stallions anchor the program, each chosen for traits that matter most when the work gets hard: stamina, agility, and a mind that stays steady when the herd breaks and the dust flies. The annual return to the remuda sale, held each October, draws horsemen who know what to look for: bone, balance, and a willing attitude. Pitchfork horses have found their way into rodeo arenas, polo fields, and ranches, from the Canadian prairie to the pampas of South America. But their first purpose remains unchanged: to serve the cowboys who ride out before sunrise, trusting their mounts to get them home safe at the end of a long day. Every foal born on the Pitchfork is more than a pedigree. It's a promise kept. The ranch's obsession with quality is written in each stride and every sure-footed turn. The Pitchfork Gray is more than a color. It's a standard, a legacy of grit, and a symbol of the ranch's unwavering belief that the best horses are the ones that prove themselves day after day on the open range. Oil came to the Pitchfork in 1980. Drilling deep into the Tannehill sands beneath the same pastures where cattle had grazed for nearly a century. The first wells hit strong, some flowing over 200 barrels a day, and within a few years, pump jacks dotted the range from the South Wichita Breaks to the edge of King County. More than 500 wells would eventually be drilled across Pitchfork land, with over 200 completed in those shallow, high-yielding sands at around 4,000 feet. Cumulative production has topped 1.8 million barrels from just the main documented properties, with waterflood operations keeping the fields alive long after the easy oil was gone. The numbers tell one story, but the real impact was felt at the boardroom table. The Williams family and their directors, true to the charter's old code, refused to let oil money change the ranch's DNA. Revenue from those wells went straight back into land, cattle, and infrastructure, never into speculation, never into debt. When the 1980s oil bust gutted many Texas fortunes, the Pitchfork kept drilling, kept hiring and kept buying land. While neighbors sold off mineral rights or mortgaged their spreads, the Pitchfork held both surface and minerals, using petroleum cash to secure the future of the Cowboy way. By the turn of the century, oil had become the ranch's silent partner, a source of stability that allowed the Pitchfork to weather droughts, market crashes, and the rising costs of modern ranching. The company's policy stayed the same: no acre ever sold, no outside debt, and every dollar earned, whether from cattle, horses, or crude, reinvested to keep the land whole. Oil brought change, but at the Pitchfork, it was always in service of the land and the legacy that began with a handshake and a promise in 1883. 10 cowboys, 165,000 acres, and 4,500 mother cows. On the Pitchfork, numbers like these are not just statistics. They are a daily reality. Each hand covers more ground than most ranch crews ever see in a lifetime, and the secret is not just in the saddle. Helicopters sweep low over the mesquite draws, driving cattle out of brush so thick a horse cannot pass. Pilots and cowboys work as a single team, rotors thumping overhead, riders posted along the edges, ready to turn a drifting herd or cut off a breakaway. What used to take a dozen men a week now happens in a single morning. Back at headquarters, computers track every calf from birth to shipping. Each animal's lineage, health records, and grazing history are logged in digital files, letting managers spot trends and make breeding choices with precision. Satellite imagery maps water sources and pasture health, while GPS collars monitor herd movement across the range. When drought threatens, data shows which pastures can take more pressure and which need rest. But technology here serves tradition, not the other way around. The same hands who ride out at dawn still mend fence, rope wild calves, and bed down in range teepees during roundups. The crew eats together at a table built in the style of the old cookhouse, swapping stories about rough broncs and helicopter runs. Efficiency does not mean cutting corners. It means honoring the land and the livestock by working smarter, not just harder. On the Pitchfork, the cowboy's job has always been more than chasing cows. It is about mastering every tool, old and new, that keeps this vast operation thriving. Every sunrise brings another test, and every season proves what this crew can do when grit meets ingenuity. Across 140 years, the Pitchfork Ranch has never sold a single acre or carried debt against its land or cattle, a record documented since its 1883 charter. This unwavering principle allowed the ranch to endure the great die-up of 1886 to 87, multiple droughts, and market crashes that ended most Texas cattle empires of the era. Today, 10 cowboys manage 165,000 acres and 4,500 cows using both century-old methods and modern technology, helicopters, computers, and oil revenues from over 500 wells. Yet, cowboys still eat at replica tables from 1900 and sleep in range teepees during roundups. The details of every business decision or family meeting remain proprietary, but the public record confirms that tradition and innovation have coexisted by design, not chance. The Pitchfork stands as living proof. When a ranch holds to its founding code, even the harshest frontiers can become home for generations.